The bright lights of the View studio buzzed with excitement. It wasn't every day that a global comedy icon graced their stage. Whoopi Goldberg, seated at the center of the long, curved table, flipped through her notes with mild curiosity. Today's guest was none other than the one and only Mr. Bean. Yes, the bumbling, rubber-faced Brit whose antics had entertained millions. "All right, ladies," Whoopi said, adjusting her signature round glasses. "We've had movie stars, politicians, and even an astronaut this month. But today, we're stepping into the absurd." She chuckled. "Brace yourselves. Mr. Bean is in the building." Sunny Hostin shook her head with a smirk. "I still don't understand a word he says, but I can't stop watching him." Joy Behar leaned in. "Oh, honey, that's because he barely talks. It's like interviewing a mime who raided a thrift store." The audience erupted with laughter. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Mr. Bean was causing his usual brand of chaos. Dressed in his classic brown tweed jacket and red tie, he stood in the green room, practicing his media face in front of a mirror. His trusted teddy dangled from his hand as he adjusted his tie, which was, predictably, crooked again within seconds. A perky production assistant popped her head in. "Mr. Bean, we're ready for you in 5 minutes." Bean spun around, his eyes widening in panic. He checked his pocket, pulling out a squished-up sandwich, a comb, and a rubber chicken. Satisfied with his inventory, he gave a confident thumbs up, then accidentally poked himself in the eye. The assistant winced. "Oh boy!" Out on the set, the band began to play a jazzy intro. Whoopi stood up as the announcer's voice echoed through the studio. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the comedy legend himself, Mr. Bean." The crowd roared with applause. Bean shuffled onto the stage, arms stiffly swinging at his sides. His face twisted into a half-smile, half-grimace as he waved with both hands, one of which still clutched his beloved teddy. He tripped over the last step but recovered with a bizarre pirouette that somehow earned him a standing ovation. Whoopi extended her hand as he approached. "Welcome to the View, Mr. Bean. I gotta ask, did you pack any trouble in that briefcase of yours?" Bean tilted his head, pretending to think. Then, with exaggerated flair, he swung his old leather suitcase onto the table, popped it open, and pulled out, of all things, a rubber fish. Joy raised an eyebrow. "Is that for dinner? Or are you planning to slap someone with it?" Bean blinked innocently. Then, without warning, he gave the fish a playful slap across his own face, sending the panel into hysterics. "You're crazy," Whoopi said, shaking her head, "and I've worked with some real wild ones." As the laughter subsided, Whoopi leaned forward. "All right, Mr. Bean, let's get serious for a moment, if that's even possible. You've been making people laugh without saying much for decades. Do you ever get tired of it?" Bean's eyes darted left and right, pretending to ponder the question. Slowly, he leaned toward Whoopi's microphone and, with a voice more nasal than anyone expected, replied, "Nope." The audience lost it. Whoopi chuckled, clearly enjoying the ridiculousness. "Well, I guess we're keeping this short and sweet." Bean, never one to stay still, began inspecting the mug in front of him. He sniffed it suspiciously before taking a loud slurp, only to spit it right back into the cup. "What is this? Motor oil?" he said, his first full sentence all day. Joy clapped her hands together. "Honey, if you think our coffee's bad, you should try the cafeteria food." The interview had barely started, and Mr. Bean was already stealing the show, without even trying. Whoopi, however, wasn't going to let him have all the fun. Leaning back in her chair, she crossed her arms. "You know, Mr. Bean, you remind me of my ex. Always making a mess and never explaining himself." Bean's face lit up mischievously. He pointed at Whoopi, then at himself, and raised his eyebrows as if to say, "Me? Your ex? You wish." The crowd howled with laughter. The battle of wits had officially begun. And if anyone thought Whoopi Goldberg would go easy on Mr. Bean, they were about to be hilariously mistaken. Whoopi adjusted her seat, eyeing Mr. Bean with a playful smirk. "All right, Mr. Bean," she said, tilting her head. "You've made millions laugh, But let's see if you can handle us for the next 10 minutes without breaking a sweat. Bean straightened his tie, though in classic Bean fashion, he only made it more crooked. His face scrunched in concentration as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a toothbrush. He proudly held it up like a trophy. Joy Behar burst out laughing. You brought a toothbrush to the view? What, were you planning to give us all dental checkups? Without missing a beat, Bean stood up, strolled to the edge of the table, and, to everyone's surprise, began miming a dentist routine. He leaned toward Whoopi, pretending to inspect her teeth. Oh no, honey, don't come near me with that thing, Whoopi said, pushing his hand away while the audience roared with laughter. Returning to his seat, Bean held up a finger, signaling he had one more trick. He pulled out a small pocket mirror, admired himself briefly, and then turned it toward Whoopi. With a quizzical expression, he wiggled his eyebrows as if to say, I'm prettier, right? Whoopi, never one to be outdone, leaned forward with a deadpan stare. Sweetheart, if that face of yours counts as pretty, I'm winning Miss Universe next year. The crowd erupted with applause as Bean feigned an exaggerated gasp, clutching his heart like he'd been mortally wounded. His mouth twisted into a pout while his eyes darted around for sympathy, receiving none. You walked into that one, buddy? Joy chimed in, shaking her head with a grin. Still recovering from the burn, Bean pulled a tiny handkerchief from his sleeve and dabbed at imaginary tears. Whoopi, sensing an opportunity, leaned in closer. You know, she said with a sly smile, I've been in this business a long time. I've worked with comedians from Robin Williams to Eddie Murphy, but you, Mr. Bean, you might be the first to make me wish I brought a translator. The room filled with laughter as Bean perked up. With mock indignation, he pointed to himself and shook his head, mouthing, Me? Confusing. Oh, you heard me. Whoopi shot back, her eyes twinkling. Bean, never one to retreat, stood up again, pretending to search his pockets. From one, he pulled a crumpled-up paper and unfolded it carefully. In bold, messy letters, it read, Official Translator. Wait, did you just bring your own cue card? Sonny Hostin asked, chuckling in disbelief. Bean nodded proudly. With dramatic flair, he pointed to the card, then to his mouth as if to say, See? Problem solved. Whoopi laughed so hard she had to fan herself. Okay, points for effort, Mr. Bean. But let's get real. You've been making people laugh without words since the 90s. Ever think about switching things up? Maybe start a podcast? Bean tilted his head as if considering the idea. Then, with exaggerated curiosity, he pulled a set of old-school headphones out of his briefcase. Massive, clunky ones straight from the 1980s. He plopped them on his head, leaned into the microphone, and in a robotic monotone said, Hello, welcome to Beancast. The audience howled with laughter while Whoopi buried her face in her hands. This man is impossible, she said between fits of giggles. Not content to stop there, Bean tapped the microphone repeatedly as if testing it, then suddenly let out a loud, cartoonish beep into the mic. Joy nearly fell out of her chair. Is this a talk show or a three-ring circus? I'm starting to wonder myself, Whoopi quipped, shaking her head. But I gotta admit, he's got guts. Bean, delighted by their reactions, sat back down, but not before accidentally knocking over his coffee mug. As the liquid spilled across the table, he pulled out an entire roll of paper towels and began mopping it up with slow, dramatic precision. Whoopi crossed her arms, unimpressed. Honey, if you clean your house like that, no wonder you're still single. Bean froze mid-wipe. He gasped, turning to the audience, and made a shocked and hurt face. With a deep sigh, he reached into his pocket, this time pulling out a small framed photo of his beloved Teddy. He held it up like a lovesick fool. Ah, now you're making us feel bad, Sonny said, covering her mouth. Bean shook his head solemnly, pointing to Teddy and then to his heart as if to say, This is my one true love. Whoopi leaned forward with mock sympathy. Oh, I get it, you're in a long-term relationship with a stuffed bear. Explains a lot. The crowd exploded in laughter once again as Bean slumped back in his chair, defeated, yet clearly reveling in every moment of the chaos he'd created. Joy wiped her eyes. I'm gonna need a nap after this. Whoopi adjusted her glasses. Yeah, and Mr. Bean better watch out. I roast people for a living. You sure you want to keep going, buddy? Bean, undeterred, lifted both hands and motioned for her to bring it on. All right, you asked for it, Whoopi said with a wicked grin. Let's see if you can handle round 2. The studio buzzed with laughter as Whoopi Goldberg leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a gleam of mischief in her eyes. Mr. Bean, ever the troublemaker, adjusted his tie again, this time pulling it so tight his face turned a cartoonish shade of pink. The audience, already in stitches, cheered for more. All right, Bean, Whoopi said, cracking her knuckles theatrically. You think you're cute with all your little props, but I've got jokes, honey, and I ain't afraid to use them. Mr. Bean raised his eyebrows in mock alarm, clutching Teddy protectively as if Whoopi might steal him. Joy Behar, always ready to pile on, chimed in. I mean, come on. How does a grown man still rely on a stuffed bear for emotional support? Without missing a beat, Bean placed Teddy gently on the table, patted his head, and pointed to him with a proud expression, clearly suggesting, he's my therapist. The audience erupted again. Whoopi shook her head with a chuckle. All right, I gotta ask. Do you ever get tired of being weird? Or is this a full-time job? Bean, pretending to ponder the question, leaned forward and grabbed a nearby notepad. With exaggerated flair, he scrawled the words, full-time. Oh, I knew it. Whoopi laughed, shaking her head. And here I thought I was eccentric. Mr. Bean, never one to back down from a comedic battle, stood up again, this time adjusting his jacket as though preparing for something grand. He reached into his pocket and produced a tiny golden trophy. The engraved plate read, World's Funniest Man. Did you bring your own award? Sonny Hostin gasped, laughing uncontrollably. Bean nodded enthusiastically, polishing the trophy with his sleeve as if to say, I came prepared. See, this is the problem, Whoopi said, pointing at him. You can't invite a man like this to your show. He brings props like he's starring in his own reality series. Bean gave an exaggerated shrug, then carefully placed the trophy in front of Whoopi. He folded his hands, smiled sweetly, and pushed it toward her, offering it as a gift. Ah, how thoughtful, Whoopi said, pretending to tear up. But honey, I already know I'm the funniest one here. The audience clapped and cheered as Mr. Bean snatched the trophy back with mock jealousy, shaking his head like he couldn't risk sharing the spotlight. Joy wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. Okay, I gotta know. Mr. Bean, what's your dating life like? Or do you scare people off before you even say hello? At that, Bean paused dramatically, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out a giant heart-shaped card. He flipped it open to reveal a photo of himself giving a thumbs up, surrounded by sparkly stickers. That's your idea of romance? Whoopi asked, raising an eyebrow. Bean nodded proudly, holding the card to his chest like it was his most prized possession. Oh, sweetie, Whoopi sighed, shaking her head. That's why you're still single. You're one romantic dinner away from scaring someone off for life. Without hesitation, Bean grabbed a pen and quickly scribbled on the card. He held it up for everyone to see. He had written, free dinner included. The crowd burst into laughter while Whoopi buried her face in her hands. I can't with you. I just can't. Mr. Bean, sensing victory, leaned back in his chair with a satisfied grin. But Whoopi wasn't done. You know what? She said, sitting up straight. I respect the hustle, but let's be real. You've been pulling these stunts for decades. Isn't it time to grow up? Bean's eyes widened in mock horror. He clutched his chest like she had physically wounded him. Slowly, he stood up, unbuttoned his jacket, and revealed a superhero t-shirt underneath. Oh no, you didn't, Whoopi groaned, shaking her head as the audience howled. Bean puffed out his chest, flexing like he was the strongest man alive. Great, Joy quipped. Now we know who protects the city when Batman's on vacation. Whoopi shook her head in disbelief. Listen, Bean, if you're a superhero, I'm the Queen of England. Bean perked up at that. With lightning speed, he pulled a plastic crown from his pocket, walked over, and gently placed it on Whoopi's head. Then, with an exaggerated bow, he knelt before her as if she were royalty. The audience lost it. I should have seen that coming, Whoopi said, struggling to keep a straight face. Bean, ever the showman, pulled a red carpet, folded neatly in his briefcase, of course, and rolled it out at her feet. What? You think I need a red carpet to remind people I'm fabulous? Whoopi asked, laughing uncontrollably. Bean nodded solemnly, giving her a double thumbs up. Joy, barely able to contain herself, gasped. I swear, you could turn a trip to the grocery store into a full-blown spectacle. Whoopi adjusted the plastic crown and, without missing a beat, shot back. And yet, somehow, I still look better than him. Bean feigned shock, clutching his heart again and stumbling back into his chair. He tilted his head, eyes wide, as if asking the audience, did she really just say that? You asked for it? Whoopi reminded him, raising her hands in mock innocence. Bean, now determined to have the last laugh, rummaged through his briefcase one last time and produced a giant whoopee cushion. With a sly smile, he placed it right on Whoopi's chair. You wouldn't dare, she exclaimed. Bean raised his eyebrows mischievously. You're playing with fire now, Whoopi warned, but as soon as she shifted in her seat, PFFFFFT. The sound echoed through the studio. The audience exploded into uncontrollable laughter while Whoopi, shaking her head, admitted defeat. All right, you win this round. Bean, his work clearly done, stood up, took a grand bow, and gave one last triumphant wave to the cheering crowd. As the laughter finally began to die down, Whoopi shook her head with a smile. I'll admit it, Mr. Bean, you're the wildest guest we've had all year. And honey, Joy added, if you ever want to co-host, I'm taking a vacation. The studio was still buzzing from the whoopee cushion incident. Whoopi adjusted the plastic crown on her head, giving Mr. Bean a mock glare. All right, Bean, she said, shaking her head. You got jokes, but do you have staying power? This is The View, baby. We go hard here. Bean, ever the silent troublemaker, tilted his head thoughtfully. Then, without a word, he stood up and dramatically pulled out a massive Hollywood Walk of Fame star. A homemade one with his name scribbled across the center in glitter glue. Sonny Hostin burst out laughing. Oh no, he did not just bring his own star. Bean nodded proudly, placing the oversized star on the table with exaggerated reverence. With a flourish, he dusted it off and gestured toward Whoopi as if to say, Where's yours? The crowd gasped in delight. Oh, you are feeling bold today, Whoopi laughed, wagging a finger at him. But honey, I already got an EGOT. You know what that means? Bean squinted in confusion. He reached for his notepad, flipped a few pages, and scribbled, EGOT equals extra great on TV? The audience howled with laughter while Whoopi shook her head in disbelief. Oh, sweetie, she said. It means I've got an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. I'm basically Hollywood royalty. Bean's eyes widened in mock horror. Clearly outgunned, he fumbled through his briefcase, finally pulling out a homemade trophy. This one labeled, BNY. Best Entertainer Anywhere Nearby, yes. Joy Behar doubled over laughing. I gotta admit, that's the most creative award I've ever seen. Whoopi clapped her hands together, leaning back in her chair. All right, I give you points for that one. But tell me something. How do you stay so famous without saying a word? I talk for a living, and you just make faces. Bean, pretending to be deeply offended, dramatically clutched his face as if it were his most precious asset. He whipped out a handheld mirror, admired his reflection, then turned it toward Whoopi with a raised eyebrow, silently asking, Isn't this enough? I mean, the face works, Whoopi admitted, stifling a laugh. But seriously, how do you keep it together when everything around you is chaos? Without missing a beat, Bean produced a Zen garden kit from his briefcase. A tiny tray filled with sand and a miniature rake. As the panel watched in disbelief, he began to rake the sand meticulously, finding his inner peace. "You are ridiculous," Whoopi said, shaking her head. "This man's out here doing therapy in the middle of a talk show." Bean, ever committed to the bit, placed a small plastic figure of himself in the Zen garden, carefully adjusting it until it stood perfectly upright. Joy raised an eyebrow. "Wait, did you just make a shrine to yourself?" Bean nodded solemnly, giving the audience a proud thumbs up. Whoopi slapped the table, laughing. Okay, I gotta know. What's a regular day like for Mr. Bean? Do you cause this much trouble everywhere you go?" Bean paused, considering the question. Then, in true Mr. Bean fashion, he pulled out a diary, a thick, leather-bound book. He flipped it open to today's date and revealed the entry. 9 a.m. wake up. 10 a.m. annoy Whoopi. 11 a.m. world domination. The audience erupted with laughter. "Oh, you wish, buddy." Whoopi shot back, still giggling. "But let's face it, you're not exactly a mastermind." Bean held up a finger as if to say, "Ah, but wait." From his jacket pocket, he dramatically unveiled a small plastic brain, his mastermind in literal form. He placed it carefully on the table and patted it like a pet. Sunny, wiping away tears, shook her head. "You know, I was expecting chaos, but not this much chaos." Whoopi leaned closer, eyeing the plastic brain. "Is that thing even functional? Because I have questions." Bean, feigning offense, snatched the brain back and cradled it protectively. He then pulled out a small screwdriver and began fixing it like a mad scientist. "All right, this is officially out of control," Joy said, laughing so hard she could barely speak. "Do you ever take a break?" Bean shook his head solemnly. He pointed to his wrist, revealing a toy watch with no actual clock face, because time for Mr. Bean was clearly irrelevant. "I'm starting to think he's an alien," Whoopi joked, narrowing her eyes. "You sure you're from Earth, buddy?" Bean gave a non-committal shrug and pulled out a plastic UFO from his bag, placing it delicately on the table. He then dramatically wiggled his fingers like he was casting a mysterious spell. "Oh, I knew it," Whoopi laughed. "Mr. Bean's not just weird, he's intergalactic." Bean clapped his hands together, triumphant. All right, you win this round," Whoopi admitted, removing the plastic crown from her head. "But let's be clear, I'm still funnier." Without missing a beat, Bean pulled out a second crown, larger and shinier, and plopped it on his own head. With a royal wave, he declared himself the true king of comedy. "You know what?" Whoopi said, throwing her hands up. "I'm done. This man is unstoppable." As the audience cheered wildly, Bean stood up, gave a sweeping bow, and blew kisses to his adoring fans. He picked up Teddy, his briefcase, and the homemade Beanie Award, and with a final wink, strutted confidently off the stage. As Mr. Bean made his dramatic exit, the audience was still roaring with laughter. Whoopi Goldberg shook her head in disbelief, adjusting her chair and trying to catch her breath. "I gotta say," she chuckled, "I've interviewed presidents, movie stars, and billionaires, but this man? He's in a league of his own." Just as everyone thought the chaos was over, Mr. Bean suddenly reappeared, this time driving a miniature, remote-controlled toy car straight onto the stage. The car had a tiny banner trailing behind it that read, "Bean rules the view." "Oh no!" Joy Behar gasped, laughing. "He's back. Somebody lock the doors." Bean, controlling the car with exaggerated focus, steered it right up to Whoopi's feet. With a proud smile, he handed her the remote and gave her a "your turn" gesture. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. "You want me to drive this thing?" Bean nodded eagerly, clapping his hands like an excited child. With a sigh, Whoopi grabbed the remote and began steering the tiny car around the set, much to the audience's delight. "I gotta admit," she said, maneuvering it in circles, "this is kind of fun." Seizing the distraction, Bean tiptoed over to Sunny Hostin's mug. With the stealth of a cartoon villain, he produced a tiny rubber snake from his pocket and carefully placed it inside the cup. "Oh no, what's he up to now?" Sunny asked suspiciously, sensing the mischief. Without a word, Bean gestured innocently to her drink, as if encouraging her to take a sip. With the whole studio watching, Sunny cautiously lifted the mug, only to let out a scream as the rubber snake popped out. "Ah, Bean!" she cried, nearly falling out of her chair. Bean, of course, collapsed into his chair, shaking with silent laughter. He patted himself on the back like a mischievous mastermind who had just pulled off the prank of the century. "All right, that's it," Whoopi declared, wiping tears from her eyes. "Security! Get this man out of here before he takes over the whole studio." Mr. Bean, sensing that his time was up, stood up dramatically. But instead of walking out gracefully, he reached into his briefcase one last time and pulled out a giant bouquet of mismatched flowers, clearly fake, and presented it to Whoopi. "Oh, for me," she said, pretending to blush. "How sweet. What's the catch?" Bean held up a finger as if to say, "Wait for it." The moment Whoopi took the bouquet, a cloud of confetti burst from it, showering her in colorful paper. The audience exploded into applause as Whoopi shook her head, defeated. "I walked right into that one," she admitted, brushing confetti from her hair. Bean, bowing deeply, turned to leave, but not before pulling out a goodbye sign and waving it at the panel.